the hidden truth behind how the Nighthawk lost its wing. Before we begin, hit you subscribe, because what you're about to hear, IS&T in any official Air Force record. This is the story of the most mysterious moment in stealth aviation history, the night the F-117, the invisible jet, was finally seen. It's a story of radar beams, betrayal, and technology pushed beyond its breaking point. This IS&T just about how the Nighthawk lost a wing. It is about how the myth of invincibility fell with it. The night the sky saw the invisible for nearly a decade. The F-117 Nighthawk ruled the night sky as a ghost, silent, unseen, and untouchable. It was a symbol of American air superiority, the machine that could strike anywhere and vanish before radar even knew it existed. But on March 27, 1999, that illusion shattered over the dark skies of Serbia. The mission seemed routine. Captain Dali Zelko, a veteran pilot with nerves of steel, climbed into his jet under the cover of a storm. His orders were precise: infiltrate Yugoslav airspace, strike a high-value target near Belgrade, and return to base undetected. It was a mission the Nighthawk had performed dozens of times before. Confidence ran high, maybe too high. Far below, in the fields and forests of Serbia, Colonel Zoltan Dani and his radar crew were preparing for the impossible. Their equipment was outdated relics from the Cold War. But they had something far more dangerous than technology: patience and creativity. 4 days, they had studied American flight patterns, predicting when and where the stealth bombers would appear. They had also modified their old Soviet radar, shortening the signal bursts to just a fraction of a second, quick enough to catch a reflection before the stealth coating could scatter it. As the F-117 approached its target, invisible to most sensors, Donnie's men waited in silence. Then, for a brief, flickering moment, the impossible happened. A faint blip appeared on the radar screen. The ghost had revealed itself. Within seconds, the radar crew launched a SA-3 surface-to-air missiles. The first missed. The second detonated close enough to shred the left wing of the Nighthawk. Inside the cockpit, Zelko felt a violent jolt as alarms screamed through his headset. The jet, once a symbol of untouchable power, spiraled out of control. Fire engulfed the wing. Hydraulic systems failed. The aircraft, built to defy physics, was now a falling star. Zelko ejected into the cold night, parachuting through clouds illuminated by the burning wreckage of his aircraft. He landed hard in a muddy field, surrounded by silence and darkness. Above him, the glow of the Nighthawk's death marked the first and only time a stealth aircraft had been shot down in combat. The news spread like wildfire. The invisible plane, the jewel of American engineering, had been seen, targeted, and destroyed by a small nation with decades-old technology. To the world, it was a shocking symbol of vulnerability. To engineers at Lockheed Martin and the Pentagon, it was a nightmare realized. Stealth wasn't invincible, it was conditional. For Serbia, the downing of the F-117 was a David and Goliath triumph, proof that human ingenuity could outthink machines. For America, it was a reminder that every technology, no matter how advanced, carries within it the seeds of its own weakness. That night changed everything. It forced military strategists to rethink stealth. It exposed how overconfidence could be as dangerous as enemy fire. And it showed that even in an age of invisible warfare, one truth remained unchanged: no machine is truly untouchable. The night sky had witnessed the unthinkable: the fall of a ghost. The secret within the wing: when dawn broke over the muddy fields of western Serbia, the wreckage of the invisible jet lay scattered like the bones of a fallen myth. Smoke still rose from the crumpled fuselage, the smell of burnt carbon and jet fuel hanging in the air. But the Nighthawk was more than a destroyed aircraft. It was a vault of secrets. And for the first time in history, that vault had been cracked open. By the time American rescue and recovery teams were alerted, it was already too late. Locals had descended upon the crash site during the night, scavenging fragments of the black, alien-looking metal. Soldiers arrived soon after, securing the area and loading the debris onto trucks bound for Belgrade. The wreck was no longer just a pile of twisted steel, it was evidence and power. To the untrained eye, the broken panels and melted composites meant nothing. But to engineers and intelligence analysts, they were priceless. Each jagged fragment contained clues about radar-absorbing coatings, about construction methods invisible to the naked eye, about the algorithms that turned metal into shadow. What had once been top secret was now scattered across a muddy field, open for the world to study. Reports soon emerged that pieces of the aircraft were quietly shared with foreign powers. Russian engineers, some said, analyzed the radar-absorbing tiles, layers of exotic polymers and iron-based paints that turned radio waves into heat. Chinese specialists were rumored to have examined the unique angular geometry, reverse engineering parts of it into later stealth designs. Whether myth or truth, one thing was undeniable. The F-117's invisibility had been dissected. The most precious piece of all, the left wing was torn apart but still recognizable. Its honeycomb structure revealed the mathematical genius behind stealth. The outer shell, composed of interlocking flat panels, was not shaped for beauty or flight, it was shaped for disappearance. Every angle, every edge, was calculated to deflect radar signals away, like light off a broken mirror. It was the physical manifestation of equations first written decades earlier by a Soviet scientist, the irony not lost on anyone in the intelligence community. When the Serbian government displayed the wing publicly, draped in mud and scorched paint, it was more than a trophy. It was a message. The myth of perfect invisibility had been pierced. The crowds that gathered to see it didn't just see a wreck, they saw proof that even America's most secret weapon could bleed. Inside the Pentagon, silence filled the conference rooms. Engineers pored over mission data, flight logs, and satellite photos, searching for what had gone wrong. Was it pilot error? Luck? Or had stealth technology finally met its match? Some officials argued that the loss was an anomaly, a one-in-a-million fluke. Others whispered a darker possibility, that stealth was no longer enough. Behind closed doors, classified memos circulated. The Air Force began accelerating programs already in development. The B-2 Spirit, the F-22 Raptor, each designed to push the boundaries of invisibility further. But deep doom, everyone knew the truth. The Nighthawk's fall had changed the rules. It had exposed the fragile line between genius and vulnerability. That broken wing, half buried in Serbian soil, carried more than metal and circuitry. It carried the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. The dream of perfect stealth had survived for barely 2 decades. Now, its secrets belonged not to one nation, but to history itself. And somewhere, in a quiet hangar, thousands of miles away, engineers looked at the next generation of stealth designs and asked themselves a question they had long avoided. If invisibility can be seen, what comes next? The math that couldn't be cheated at Nighthawk was born not from aerodynamics, but from mathematics, from a formula that claimed to bend the laws of detection. In the cold, fluorescent corridors of Lockheed's Skunk Works, engineers didn't dream of beauty. They dreamed of disappearance. Every bolt, every panel, every inch of that strange, angular body was designed by an equation, not an artist. It was a plane built to fool the eye of a machine, and for nearly 2 decades, it did exactly that. But math, for all its perfection, doesn't live in the real world. The air is never perfectly still. The radar signal never travels in a perfectly straight line. And war never follows a perfect equation. Stealth was never true invisibility. It was a lie, told with precision. The jagged design of the F-117 scattered radar waves like a broken mirror. Its coating absorbed signals that would otherwise betray its presence. But every flight came with a price. The jet's odd shape made it aerodynamically unstable, a flying paradox. Without computers constantly adjusting its control surfaces, the Nighthawk would tumble out of the sky in seconds. Even its stealth coating was a fragile secret. Made of exotic materials and iron-fused paint, it had to be applied by hand, layer upon layer. In rain or extreme heat, it peeled away. Maintenance crews called it black glass, a nightmare to preserve, and a fortune to replace. The aircraft's very skin was as delicate as the illusion it created. In the early days, that illusion worked flawlessly. Enemy radar screens showed only silence. The Nighthawk flew through defenses like a ghost. But technology never stands still. Especially in war, adversaries began experimenting with radar frequencies, using older, longer wavelengths that could sometimes catch faint reflections from stealth aircraft. What once seemed invisible started to flicker on the edge of detection, a ghost now haunted by its own shadow. And then came the night over Serbia. The missile that ripped through the Nighthawk S-wing was not guided by advanced radar or futuristic sensors. It was guided by patience and by human intuition. The Serbian operators who launched it didn't defeat stealth through superior machines, but through adaptation. They used mathematics of their own, adjusting angles, timing radar sweeps, and waiting for the one instant when the F-117 would reveal itself. When that missile struck, it didn't just shatter metal, it shattered a myth. The belief that perfection could be calculated, that invisibility could be built from numbers alone. In the aftermath, engineers studied the incident obsessively. They pored over radar logs, missile trajectories, and telemetry data, looking for flaws in the formula. But there were no mistakes, only limits. The math had done its job. The pilot had done his. The plane had flown as designed, and yet reality had intervened. The truth was simple and brutal. No equation could ever account for chaos. Weather, timing, human instinct, the variables of war that no supercomputer could predict, had rewritten the outcome. Still, even in defeat, the Nighthawk story didn't end. The very equations that failed that night would evolve, refined and improved, to guide the next generation of stealth, the B-2 Spirit, the F-2 Raptor, the F-35 Lightning II. Each new machine carried within it the lessons learned from the Nighthawk's fall. Because failure in engineering is not the end. It's the data that builds the future. The Nighthawk lost its wing, the math didn't die. It evolved, and from the ashes of one broken formula rose an entire new science. A science that still tries, even now, to cheat the impossible. What the enemy learned when the F-117 fell, it didn't just crash into a field, it crashed into history. For NATO, it was a moment of disbelief. The aircraft that had symbolized American invulnerability had been struck down by weapons older than the pilots who fired them. For the rest of the world, it was something else entirely. Opportunity. Within hours, news of the downed stealth fighter reached Moscow and Beijing. Satellite images confirmed what intelligence agencies had only dreamed of: a chance to study the skin of the invisible before U.S. recovery teams could secure the site. Scavengers and soldiers alike began gathering fragments, pieces of composite skin, charred panels, and sections of the left wing that had survived the explosion. What they held in their hands was worth more than gold. The F-117's design had always been a closely guarded secret, a masterpiece of geometry, radar physics, and material science. Its shape wasn't meant to fly beautifully. It was meant to disappear. The faceted panels, sharp edges, and radar-absorbing coating represented decades of research into one of humanity's most elusive goals: invisibility. When those fragments made their way out of Serbia, they carried with them the blueprints of an era. Over the following years, whispers circulated through defense circles. Russian scientists were said to have analyzed the material composition of the Nighthawk's outer shell, discovering the precise balance of iron, carbon, and polymer that absorbed radar waves. Chinese engineers reportedly studied the way the internal frame distributed heat to minimize infrared signatures. Both nations took notes not only on what the Americans had built, but also on what they had chosen to hide. The wreckage became a silent teacher. Every dent, every fracture, told a story of how the Nighthawk lived and died in combat. From those lessons, a new generation of stealth aircraft began to take shape. In China, the Chengdu J-20 emerged long, angular, and menacingly sleek. While not a copy of the F-117, it echoed many of its principles: canted tail fins, blended edges, and radar-absorbent surfaces designed to deceive rather than deflect. In Russia, the Sukhoi Su-57 followed a different path, emphasizing agility and speed, but still bearing traces of lessons learned from that Serbian field. It wasn't espionage in the traditional sense. It was evolution, powered by debris. When the United States lost that aircraft, it didn't just lose technology, it lost monopoly. For decades, stealth had been America's ace in the hole, a weapon so advanced it changed the psychology of war. Now, its secrets were scattered across continents, examined under microscopes, reverse-engineered in quiet laboratories, far from public eyes. In the Pentagon, analysts realized the truth. By proving stealth could be defeated, the U.S. had forced every adversary to start thinking like them. Stealth was no longer a mystery. It was a puzzle that anyone could attempt to solve. The Nighthawk's fall reshaped military philosophy. Nations around the world shifted their investments from brute force to invisibility, from firepower to information. Radar engineers became as valuable as fighter pilots. War itself was entering a new dimension, one where silence, speed, and deception mattered more than size or strength. Some within the Air Force later admitted, off record, that the true cost of losing the F-117 wasn't measured in dollars or metal, it was measured in imitation. Every stealth jet that rose afterward, no matter the flag it carried, was a reflection of the moment when the invisible became visible. The night the Nighthawk lost its wing, the world gained a new set of eyes. And in those eyes, America's greatest weapon became everyone's greatest inspiration. Because in warfare, knowledge never stays secret forever. Sometimes, all it takes is one broken wing to change the balance of power for generations. The legacy of a broken wing. More than 2 decades have passed since that night over Serbia, the night the sky caught the invisible. The wreckage has long been cleared. The headlines faded into memory, but the legacy of the F-117 Nighthawk never disappeared. It simply changed shape, just as the aircraft itself once did, bending, adapting, vanishing, only to return in a new form. Today, the Nighthawk still flies, not in combat, but in silence. Sightings in the Nevada desert and test flights over California have confirmed what many suspected. The jet that was officially retired in 2008 never truly left service. It lives owning classified training operations, testing radar systems, and helping the next generation of stealth aircraft prepare for wars that haven't yet been fought. To the pilots who still fly it, the Nighthawk isn't just a relic. It's a living ghost, the teacher of a new age of invisibility. It's angular-skinned, once a mystery to the world, is now a symbol of human persistence, a reminder that innovation doesn't vanish with failure. It evolves from it. The broken wing that once fell to Earth in 1999 became more than a piece of wreckage. It became a mirror, a reflection of the truth that even the most advanced machines carry flaws, and that perfection in technology is never a destination, only a moment before the next discovery. Engineers and historians now look back on the F-117 as both a triumph and a warning. It proved that mathematics could make metal disappear, that physics could outsmart radar, and that imagination could rewrite the rules of war. But it also proved something humbler, that no machine, no matter how advanced, can escape the laws of imperfection. Paint wears down, circuits fail. Equations, once flawless on paper, crumble under the pressure of real skies. And yet, that's where the Nighthawk's real magic lies. Its legacy isn't one of defeat, it's one of transformation. The loss over Serbia forced engineers to rethink what stealth truly meant. It led to new materials, smarter sensors, an aircraft like the F-2 to Raptor and the F-35 Lightning II. Jets that combined invisibility with intelligence, where the Nighthawk relied on static geometry. Its successors used fluid computation, where it depended on darkness. They used data. In a strange way, the missile that tore through the Nighthawk's wing didn't just destroy it, it gave birth to an ERA where invisibility wasn't just about hiding from radar, but from everything. Detection, prediction, even expectation. The pilots who once called the Nighthawk the Black Jet now see its ghost everywhere, in every drone that slips unseen across the night sky, in every classified design that leaves no radar. Tracing every whisper of new technology that bends light itself. The F-117 story is no longer just about war. It is about evolution, about how the pursuit of invisibility became a metaphor for humanity's endless drive to outthink its own limits. Because that's the real hidden truth. The Nighthawk lost its wing. Stealth didn't die. It was reborn, stronger, smarter, and more silent than ever. And as long as there are engineers who dream of defying physics, pilots who chase the edge of invisibility, and enemies who listen to the sky for ghosts that may no longer exist, the legend of that broken wing will never fade. It will continue to fly unseen, but never forgotten. So if you've made it this far, you now know what the headlines never told, the story of how one fall became the rise of a new age of technology. Subscribe for more stories of the machines that changed history and the moments that nearly destroyed them.